Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast. We have an amazing guest for you today. She is an industry thought leader, a technology evangelist, and she's passionate about delivering market intelligence to the mortgage industry. Please help me welcome Heidi Iverson. She is the Director of Growth at Mobility Marketing Intelligence. Heidi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Michael. Happy to be here.
Well, it is great to have you. You have a wealth of knowledge and expertise. For our listeners who maybe aren't familiar with you, why don't we start with giving you a little bit of your background? How'd you get in the mortgage industry? Most people don't just go to school and say, I can't wait to be in the mortgage industry. So tell us a little bit about your background before we dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So taking you even back before the mortgage industry, I'm really an industrial and organizational psychologist by trade. And so I've essentially had three careers in my life so far. And, most people don't know what an industrial and organizational psychologist is. And so really fundamentally, no matter what industry I've been in, my goal is to really optimize organizational effectiveness through a company's people. So whether that's their strategy, their process, their procedure, their mindset, like that type of thing. And so I started my
Love
career
it.
doing, yeah, thank you. Thank you. I started my career doing management consulting. So I consulted to big businesses. I helped them develop employee engagement surveys, and through that, I got my love for data. And so with those surveys, we would always be analyzing the results, looking at the data, and figuring out the trends, what an organization needed to do to really get a little bit more out of their employees and really match their strategy better. And so started doing that. Shortly after the crash, I did a career shift and I started consulting to employment agencies. And I was working with them to really understand how to grow their employment brand on social media and use social media to hire more employees for their clients. And so, just like I think almost everybody, I ended up meeting somebody through those relationships who was in the mortgage business, and I kind of fell into the mortgage industry. And so, gosh, that was about 8 years ago. And so, my role to start was I went into a company that had just had a big leadership shift. And so they really needed to, regrow their organization from the ground up. And so I came in to run the recruiting department and build that out. And through their leadership team there, I had an opportunity to wear a lot of different hats. And so I got to dabble in, I designed their loan officer training program, did all their onboarding, their offer letters, their backgrounds, gosh, their performance management for their loan officers, and even sometimes was in charge of licensing and LOS help. And so broad background from that standpoint. And then just about a year ago, I moved over to MMI, and so kind of moved over to the fintech space. And so
Okay.
over at MMI, now my role is really managing their strategic accounts. And so, I work with, other big partners to really understand their strategy and help them best, use the MMI tools for their loan officers to grow their business.
I love it. What a wonderful background. And so I'm going to ask some more questions as we're talking organizations and market. We'll definitely get into MMI in a little bit. But so as you've made those shifts, you analyze data, give me a little bit of your insights of kind of where do you see the mortgage industry, especially as it relates to loan officers and the data and who's producing and the companies that are trying to keep their top performers. Give me some background on that.
Yeah, so I think it's really, it's always an interesting time in the mortgage business, particularly now, as it relates to just the industry in as a whole. I think we all knew that there was going to be some contraction, with this environment. And so I had one of my team members run some data on the number of loan officers who have transitioned out since, the beginning of 2022 to 2023. And, there's a good percentage or a good number of folks that have gotten out of business. And so really, as it applies to data, I think it's a great time for loan officers to gain market share. This is a time to kind of get back to basics with the basic skills that we all know, we've all, learned about for years and years, and really kind of, start doing the fundamentals of sales again and gain that market share. So when the industry turns, which it will, they'll be well positioned to grow their volume.
It's such a good point, and I do a lot of coaching with loan officers, branch managers, and it's amazing how when people were so busy during, the heyday of COVID, they were just taking applications. They were just taking applications. And to your point, all the fundamentals of selling kind of went out the door. And as I'm talking to these people, I'm like, so do you do open houses? They're like, I used to do that a number of years ago. I stopped going to open houses. But they're wondering why their pipeline is empty. I'm like, well, do you go to the closings with all of your clients with the closing? Nah, I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. And as I would continue to probe, more and more of these things came up of, I used to, I don't anymore. I really should use video. I was doing a lot of video. I'm not doing it. And I think people lost sight of what are the fundamentals to be successful selling, especially as it relates to the mortgage industry. So great insights there. Let's talk a little bit about data and data as it relates to start with. I'm an employer. I want to get the best loan officers out there, the highest producers. Well, let's just say it frankly, there's a lot of bravado in the industry. There's a lot of people who just kind of claim to have incredible numbers. What is it about some of the technology and some of the data out there that can really help validate us and give us the point of truth so that we know, is Jim, is Sue, is Mary, are they truly the top producer they're saying they are, or do the numbers not quite match up?
Sure. I think that's such a great question. When I started in the industry, gosh, I can't tell you how many times I sent my team out to, do visits when production was said to be X, and you know, it turned out it wasn't quite X. And so, I think, having the access to data in that way, it just allows you to really operate, from a smarter standpoint. Being able to see production prior will help just drive the conversations in the right direction.
And I think it brings a little bit more of that accountability. And it's not to make the loan officer feel bad, but it starts off at a different benchmark when that discussion starts with and saying, hey, you have a wonderful track record. We see that over the last 2 years, this is what you've been able to produce. Tell me why you'd be a good fit. When you can start at that point, then all of that fluff, all of that bravado kind of goes away, and you can start making better and more informed decisions. So we're talking about data, but one of the challenges that lenders have is, where do I get this point of truth, this source of truth? Where is the data coming from? How do I get it? Tell me about MMI and what you guys are doing to be able to provide that type of data. And then I want to find out some of the other cool and exciting things that you guys are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, MMI is the platform. It's something that I've implemented at every lending company I'd been at, prior to actually making the shift over to the company. But really, I think folks that might be watching this think of us as a search tool. And so that has always been one of the core capabilities or competencies of MMI as a platform. And so it allows you to get in and really look at that loan officer data, see how much they're originating, for a look back period. And same thing on the real estate side. And so you can use the system to jump in and see, who's basically doing business in what markets.
Well, and I love that. For one, it gives that point of truth for the loan officer to say, okay, what is their track record been? If I'm going to go out and if I'm trying to get the top talent, I really want the numbers to match up with what they're telling me. But you also mentioned an interesting thing on the real estate side. And I want to kind of combine this question because you've helped a lot of companies grow their social media profiles and everything. One of the challenges that I see for a lot of loan officers and a lot of lenders and branches is, we're in a heavy purchase market now. How do they foster and grow those real estate relationships? So the first point is, you guys have the data to say who in the real estate side of the business should they be talking to, right? They can look at
Absolutely.
that, who is the producers and everything. But let's talk a little bit about, social media and leveraging data. How would you help a loan officer leverage that data to kind of grow those relationships and leverage social to grow the realtor side of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another really, really great question. And I think, there's kind of three buckets that I would put that in. The first bucket is if you're just starting small. What I like to tell the loan officers that I coach is, we have a little Google button in our platform, which allows you to launch out to Google and do some research on the or on the real estate agent that you might want to be calling. Okay. And so You should always know, you should know the person before you make a cold call. It kind of warms up that cold call so it's not so ice cold. And so that's a bare minimum. From there, kind of moving into a strategy where you start engaging with their social media is certainly going to be something that's going to get you noticed as a loan officer, as opposed to, once again, just picking up the phone and making an ice cold call. And so that's kind of as a bare minimum. The other piece of that too, I think there's a component for both the real estate agent that should be considered, as well as, your future buyers or borrowers. And so on the agent side, one great way to add value to their day to day, and really their business, is by posting valuable content on your social media pages. And so I think you'd mentioned a video a little earlier in the episode where, not a lot of loan officers are getting out and doing video. Which is just kind of where it is. But I would say, if we want to talk a little bit about trends and where folks should be thinking about going, certainly video is a really, really key component, not only to reach your agent base as a way for them to familiarize themselves with you as a loan officer, but also learn, what you can do, and also the value that you can bring. So that's that on the agent side. And then really when it comes to a buyer or a borrower, a future buyer or borrower, most all folks are going out and they're doing some research on a loan officer before they engage with them to become their loan officer. And so to have that social media presence or proof there, furthers your ability for them for a potential buyer to want to interact with you and call you as the industry expert in that area.
Oh, so many great tips right there. If you guys are listening, go back, play it, write down, jot down those notes. A couple of the areas that I think are critical when we start talking social, and you really hit upon them nicely, is I always say there's three main pillars to success on social. One, you've got to grow your network, right? You could have the world's greatest post, and if one person is following you, nobody cares. So you've got to work to actively grow that, whether it's on the realtor side, whether that's on the borrower side. It should be a combination of the two. The other part you talked about is engagement. And I think so many people focus just on what they're posting, which is important, and we'll come back to that in a second. But engagement, a lot of times it's like crickets. They're like, why aren't people engaging my content? And I always ask, well, how many people's content are you engaging with? And it gets really quiet, and they're like, well, I haven't done much. And so you want to engage because you want to really build that credibility, that social proof. And then to your point about posting, it's got to be something of value. It can't be with your hand out, what can you do for me? What can you do for me? But valuable insights in the market. So Heidi, great content there. I know our listeners are going to go back and listen. You and I could keep going on for a while, but we've only got a few more minutes. What's next on the horizon for MMI? What are some of the other things that you guys are working on? What are some of the things that lenders really need to be aware of where you can help them as they look to navigate these challenging market conditions and grow their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big things, we have a really exciting roadmap that we're building out for the rest of 2023. One of the most exciting things that we just launched is our business intelligence dashboard tool. And so we started by launching four main dashboards, and since we have a team of dev people on our back end that have built out 25 plus different dashboards. And so we're
Wow.
really leaning on our clients for understanding really where their need is. And we started kind of high level. So the BI dashboards allow any lender to jump in and really just look at themselves as an organization and see kind of where their data falls out with regard to production, kind of how they stack up against the industry. We can take that information and kind of compare it against another lender or up to five lenders. We have components built out for individual loan officers. So we show loan officer benchmark information, as well as a tool that can help the loan officers grow their business in areas that they're not currently producing in. So lots of really exciting components behind the BI dashboards at MMI.
Fantastic. And I also understand that you're going to be in the near future rolling out your own podcast. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So that's really exciting as well.
So tell everyone a little bit about that podcast. I want to drive as many of our listeners. I'm a big believer in the more people podcasting, the more we all benefit. There's great insights to be had. So what are some of the things that you're going to be covering? How can people subscribe to your podcast? Let's get as many people on your platform as we can.
Super, super. So yeah, the podcast is going to be called One Data Point, and kind of the premise of it is going to be using our data that I have access to at the national level, and be pulling out relevant statistics that I think will help all loan officers grow. And so the focus, really, the I guess the subscriber base really is going to be focused on loan officers, and really kind of doing like mini series, if you will, of your biggest challenges, and how are the top producers in various marketplaces addressing those challenges and overcoming those challenges. There'll be a segment where I look at, veteran top producers compared to newbie top producers. And so I have a handful of different series provided to kind of kick off the podcast that we'll do, a show every week. And it's really designed to help loan officers, understand the strategies of the top producers and what they're really doing to grow their business using the data points from MMI.
Oh, Heidi, I love it. If you guys are listening, definitely go check out that podcast. You guys don't want to miss those insights. I know I will be tuning in. Heidi, one last thing I want to end with. You've shared so many good data points, so many key insights. If somebody wants to find out more about you, your podcast, if they want to find out more about MMI, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
It's either best way is email or text message. And so email address is heidi@mmi.io. And a text message can be sent to area code 251-509-2243. And I'm always happy to talk strategy.
Outstanding. Oh, great insights, Heidi. Thank you so much for being a guest on this episode of the Fintech Hunting Podcast.
Thank you, Michael.